Uh-oh, I'm in trouble again. The Canadian Broadcast Standards Council, the broadcast censors, are threatening to kick Sun News out of their kangaroo court and in turn jeopardize the future of this station. Our broadcast license could be revoked, jeopardizing your ability to watch the hard news and straight talk that you've come to love over the last year and a bit. So how'd we get here? Look, I admit it. I made some grown-ups very sad because I said things on TV they disagreed with. Now, of course, I'm using the term grown-ups loosely because if a grown-up were indeed made sad by my opinions on this show, they could do a few grown-up things like ignore me, like turn the channel, hell, turn off the TV altogether and talk to your spouse for once. Or what if I said, what I said made them really, really super duper sad? They could write a critical letter to me or comment on Twitter. As you know, I love to read out my hate mail on TV. I guess if someone was super duper triple sad, like really, really sad with a sour lemon on top, like Eeyore, the sad donkey in Winnie the Pooh, they could launch some sort of campaign to marginalize me. I mean, start a We Don't Like Ezra page on Facebook and get 1 million people to click like. Have a we're all getting together for a barbecue and we're not going to watch Ezra on TV kind of party. You know, make t-shirts saying, Ezra makes me sad. Start a club and say no Ezra's allowed. You could even get all Scientologists about it and go door to door telling people not to watch me on TV either because I make you sad. I guess what I'm saying is that there's a lot of things for sad people to do about me making them sad, but the one thing that sad people, even super sad Eeyore types, aren't allowed to do is to get the government to shut me up through the force of law. I mean, my boss here at The Sun has the right to shut me up, at least on his TV station and in his newspapers, and everyone has the right to click off their own TV sets for themselves. But no one has the right to legally have me shut up by, say, the police. It's called freedom of speech. It's been an ancient right that we've enjoyed for centuries. If you're forgetful and need it written down, well, you can check it out in our Bill of Rights, as passed more than 50 years ago by the great John Diefenbaker. In the very first section of that law, it guarantees freedom of speech and freedom of the press. And in 1982, Canada reconfirmed that in our Charter of Rights. Section 2B guarantees, and I quote, freedom of thought, belief, opinion, and expression, including freedom of the press and other media of communication, unquote. That's the highest law of the land, our Constitution. Folks, that pretty much covers the bases here, don't you think? Well, you don't have to answer that because I already know the answer. Canadians love, absolutely love their freedom of speech, not just their own freedom to say and write things, but just as importantly, their freedom to watch and read whatever they want to, whenever they want, no matter what the Eeyores say. I know this because of the explosive growth of communications technology that has put the power of choice into the hands of each of us. I'm not just talking about 500 channels on your TV cable box. I'm talking about satellite TV and radio, or Netflix, or video on demand, or iTunes, or YouTube, or just sending videos from your cell phone to someone else. I know that Canadians love freedom of speech, not because they're out signing nerdy petitions about it, but because they're doing it. They're using that freedom every day more than ever. They are living that freedom. I think that freedom of speech is actually the most popular freedom in Canada today. It's the most important for sure, politically, but even for non-political people, it's just something that we love about our lives in the modern era. Except the Eeyores. You know who I mean, the sad people who are always sad. They're actually called the Canadian Broadcast Standards Council. Look, I understand why it's their job to be sad about how bad people like me use my freedom of speech. I say things I'm not supposed to. I ask questions I'm not supposed to. I just don't follow along with the rules of the rest of the media party. I'm not a think-alike. And they attract other sad people who share their, well, let's be honest, their hatred for me. That's right. The Eeyores of the Canadian Broadcast Censors Council are sad. But underneath all that sorrow, there's a viciousness that comes with their power. And it attracts other vicious people too. Remember how the broadcast censors work. Any Canadian, seriously, just one person out of 34 million of us, can write to the censors and they will launch an investigation into me and what I say on TV. That one complainer can be a professional complainer, say someone of a rival political stripe or a professional activist, someone who, if they were really grown up, would just write a letter or start some Facebook campaign. But the broadcast censors actually invite such people to file complaints. And once a complaint is filed, the censors gather together in secret, no public hearings, no rule of law. I'm not even allowed to attend, neither is my lawyer. And they issue a judgment about whether or not I broke the rules of television. Folks, did you know that there are rules of television? And once their judgments are made, I can't appeal them like you could appeal a real court order. Now, as you know, the Broadcast Censors Council has been a magnet for professional leftists who hate our TV channel. Remember when Krista Erickson dared to ask Margie Gillis why she deserved $1.2 million in government handouts for her art including her fancy swan hands art. Well, 6,676 people complained to the Eeyores at the Broadcast Standards Council. Not all of them watched the show. In fact, I'm going to guess that most of them didn't, because Gillis and her friends actually set up websites to generate complaints against Krista Erickson for having the impertinence and audacity of asking about the 1.2 million taxpayers' bucks. It made them sad. So they tried to have Krista kicked off TV. See what I mean? Sad people, angry people, not wanting to debate, not wanting to allow other points of view, just wanting to smash things. Maybe Eeyore isn't the right analogy, because he's pretty low-key. I think the 6,676 people who complained to the Eeyores were more mad than sad. They just wanted to destroy Krista's right to ever dare ask questions they didn't like.
Hulk! Smash!
Yeah, that's more Hulk smash than I'm sad. Same thing happened when some thin-skinned ignoramus a couple of years ago heard that 1980s classic rock song, Money for Nothing, for the first time and didn't like the use of the word faggot in the song. The song has been played millions of times in Canada, but the Eeyores were sad about it. They don't like the word faggot, even in the context of a song against homophobia, a song that Elton John himself sings. So the censors actually banned that song, because when all you've got is a censorship hammer, you know, everything starts to look like a nail. Same thing happened to me back in December. Remember, I was responding to the Chiquita Banana Company's announcement of trade sanctions against the Canadian oil sands, and I called for a Canadian counter-boycott of Chiquita bananas in return. So I ended that show with a Spanish insult to Chiquita's anti-Canadian vice president, saying, look at this. Hey you. Yeah, you, Manuel Rodriguez. Chinga tu madre. Yeah, no big deal. It's not illegal to say that on Canadian TV, even in the official TV rules enforced by the broadcast censors. But to the professional political activists, it's about trying to stop views they disagree with. I didn't do anything wrong by insulting Chiquita Banana, but people who ideologically disagree with me, people who don't really even watch the channel but don't want you to either, decided to try to use the broadcast censors to shut me up. This guy in particular, David Klimenhaga, a union boss from Alberta who doesn't seem to like the Sun, wrote a letter of complaint to the broadcast censors, telling them to shut me up. That's Klimenhaga on your screen now, hanging out with lefty politicians and activists, smiling in front of a Che Guevara mural in Cuba, even wearing a Cuban lapel pin. Now, I've invited Klimenhaga on this show to say his piece, to debate me, even just to write a letter, and I'll read it out on the show, but he refuses. See, he's not interested in a debate. That's the whole point here. He doesn't want a debate. He wants a monopoly on political discourse. No surprise that he's apparently a big fan of Castro's Cuba. Klimenhaga wants the media party of the think-alikes in the other channels. So he's like them. He wants to kill off the Sun News Network and get back to the Tweedledum and Tweedledee of CBC and CTV and Global, where you get the whole spectrum of opinion from A to B. Think-alikes on everything from the oil sands to Omar Khadr to David Suzuki to anti-Americanism to pro-gun control to pro-union bosses. You know, the official platform of the media party. They hate us. So, cue the Hulk.
Hulk! Smash!
They want to Hulk smash us. Klimenhaga asked the censors to smash us. And they did. Well, at least they're trying. Last month on June 13th, the Broadcast Censors Council, led by a Jean Chrétien-era liberal patronage appointee named André Noël, and packed with 3 of the Sun's competitors from other TV stations, issued a judgment determining that I had broken the rules of TV. They said I was, quote, biased, and that my comments were, quote, tirade. Seriously, that was the broadcast censors. That's what they said. And they demanded that I read out a false confession on the air that I had done something wrong. They said I, quote, indulged in language excesses that widely overstep the limits of what is acceptable in dealing with controversial issues. So apparently there are limits to what you can say about a controversial issue, and the limits are don't make people sad or mad, just stay very vanilla. Unless, of course, you're left-winger, then have at her. The broadcast censors said that you can't call politicians or other public figures liars, which is a bit of a problem if politicians are lying, because you're apparently not allowed to point that out now because it makes them sad. Here's what they actually wrote. They said, quote, I said it in a distinctly aggressive tone several times that Rodriguez was a liar. That's the guy from Chiquita Banana. They said I was, quote, unrepentant about all of this, so they ordered me to read out their false confession on TV. Well, I actually did read it out. I read it out to mock it and analyze it and call for a campaign against the censors. I even invited one of the censors who wrote the decision, named Troy Reeb, on the show to debate me for 15 minutes. I thought it was a good discussion about free speech and how weird the idea of TV censorship is in 2012. Now, Troy Reeb obviously agreed, or he wouldn't have come on or shaken my hand afterwards. Well, that was a month ago. Ooh, boy, and that was a month ago. And since then, the censors have been stewing and seething and plotting their revenge. Boy, they didn't like what I've been saying about them. Boy, they didn't like how I made fun of them. Boy, they didn't like the fact that I dared to argue back instead of accepting meekly their decision that I was wrong for making someone sad. And so last week, they sent another scorching letter to my bosses. Oh my God, you will not believe what they had to say now.
Hulk! Smash!
Oh, they're in smashing mode, my friends. After the break, I delve into the latest smash letter from the broadcast censors. They aren't Eeyores anymore. They're not just sad sacks. I'll show you who they are after the break. This story gets crazier. So on June 13th, the Eeyores, the sad guys at the Canadian Broadcast Standards Council, ruled that I was a bad boy because I made them sad, and I made a far left-wing union organizer in Edmonton sad because I was mean to a foreign company called Chiquita Banana that had announced trade sanctions on Canada. For my punishment, I was ordered to read out a false confession, whereby I read out their condemnation that I was a bad, bad man for making people sad. And you know what? I did. I actually complied with their order. I read it out. I provided ample context. I was happy to read it out because I wanted you to hear just how stupid it was. I read it out, and then I went further. I invited on one of my Star Chamber judges from the broadcast censors named Troy Reeb to expand on his condemnation in person. And to his personal credit, he actually did come on the show. We had a great argy-bargy for 15 minutes. But there were two things that Troy Reeb said that day that weren't quite right. The first thing he said was that our membership in this Broadcast Censors Council was voluntary. Listen to this.
Sun News has been a voluntary member of the Broadcast Standards Council.
I want to stop you there.
Hold on.
Section 6 of our TV license requires that we join it.
Yes, but let's...
So the government's ordering us. Don't say it's
It does not
voluntary.
require. Your lawyers put it forward before the government and volunteered to be part of the Broadcast Standards Council. There's plenty of
So
press...
can we leave?
There's absolutely. You can leave.
It is true that the broadcast censors are a private club. They're not like a court. But it's not true that they're voluntary. It is a legal requirement put on us by the Government of Canada that we're a member of this censors panel. You can see right here, paragraph 6 of our government TV license requires it. Same with every other TV station in Canada, which is why we're all in there, 100% of us, because we're forced to. And that's important because just like I can agree to be censored by my boss because that's a voluntary part of my relationship with him, I guess I could agree to be censored by a private club that I voluntarily joined. But this Broadcast Censors Council is not voluntary. It pretends to be, but then you've got the state ordering you in your license agreement to join it. That ain't voluntary. But Troy Reeb did something else. He gave an indication of what life would be like if we didn't have this private club of censors, this outsourced group of nosy Parkers telling me what I can or can't say, meeting in secret, telling Krista what she could or couldn't do with her hands, telling Dire Straits 25 years after their hit song that it was illegal. Here's what Troy Reeb said. Look at this.
Prior to the Broadcast Standards Council, which is operated by the broadcasters as a self-regulating body, prior to that, the CRTC, the Ottawa bureaucrats, actually did the regulation themselves. And that's a slippery slope. That's a dangerous place to be. Do you really
refuse
want
that dichotomy.
government bureaucrats?
You're saying government bureaucrats censor or my friend and competitor Troy Reeb censors? Troy Reeb said, Ezra, you might not like me condemning you, but better me than a government bureaucrat. You know what? He's right. Better him than a government bureaucrat, but that's a false choice. There's a third option, better freedom of speech than either him or the bureaucrat. The reason why this whole bizarre, complex scheme of censorship exists in the first place is because the government has legal regulations requiring all of this. Look at Section 5 of the broadcasting regulations. They require it. Look right here at them on the screen. Start with what they're called, programming content. That's an alarm bell right there. Why is the government, and not you and me and our own judgment, regulating programming content? Do they know better than we do? Is their judgment better than each of the 34 million Canadians with a remote control or a computer mouse? Let's read these regulations. Let's look at Section 5(1)(b). It bans any abusive comment or abusive pictorial representation that is likely to expose an individual, group, or class of individuals to hatred or contempt. Why, that just happens to be identical language to the Human Rights Commission's censorship language the Parliament repealed just this spring. Yet it lives on in TV land. And look at how vague that is. What is an abusive comment? Or vaguer yet, what is an abusive pictorial representation? What does that mean? Talk about a free hand for regulators to basically censor whatever they want to impose their own political tastes on every other Canadian. Or check out Section 5(1)(c), which bans, quote, any obscene or profane language or pictorial representation. Now, you know the old saying, what's obscenity? Well, I know it when I see it. Well, that's true, because for each of us, it's different, isn't it? In fact, that's basically saying, I know it when I see it, because it's an admission that you can't really lay down objective rules in advance, because it's all opinion, it's all gut feel. Some people in Canada think that allowing a woman to go out in the street without forcing a burqa on her is obscene and profane. It's so subjective, isn't it? But it's the law. That's Section 5 of the Broadcasting Regulations, which is why our CRTC license forces us to join this Broadcast Censors Council. It's antiquated regulation passed by a government law long ago, enforced by the CRTC and implemented by the broadcast censors, and that's what's caused this whole problem, which leads me to the new letter we got last week. Ooh, boy. While Troy Reeb was a good enough sport to come on the show, well, Andre Noel, the boss of the broadcast centers, well, she sure was not. We've invited her on the show, but she's refused to come on. Now, as I said before, I actually obeyed her order to read out the false confession of guilt on the air. I just surrounded it with 15 minutes of counter arguments. I was abundantly clear that I disagreed with her, but I actually complied with her foolish edict. Big mistake by me, because last week, Noel fired off this new letter to my bosses. The letter was written by Liberal Andre Noel, and it was written to the Vice President of Quebec, or Serge Sasseville. Not to me, not to anyone on our editorial team, not as a letter to the editor, which I'd read, not as an answer to our friendly invitation to her to come on the show. See, like David Klimenhaga or the 6,676 Hulk smash types who want to shut down Krista, Andre Noel doesn't want to debate things. She wants my bosses to, well, to do what? After all, hadn't I read out the false confession that they ordered me to do back in June? What did they want me to do now? I'll tell you after the break. Don't move a muscle. Welcome back. You know, the war against our freedom of speech continues. So apparently reading the Broadcast Standards Council decision on the air isn't enough punishment. Andre Noel, the boss of the censors, has demanded that the Sun, and I quote, provide a written plan to obey the broadcast censors, promise never again to be controversial or make people sad, and here's my favorite, point 3, quote, a plan in writing describing the measure that will be taken by Sun News Network to avoid future breaches of your membership obligations. Did you get that last one? Now, I complied with their June 13th order. I complied under duress and with noisy objections, but I actually did read out on the air that I made them sad. But that's not enough for them. They want a written promise in advance that I will never make them sad again. How would that even be done? How can you even censor someone in advance? What would that even look like? We hereby promise that Ezra won't hurt anyone's feelings, even those activists who make a professional living by having their feelings hurt. Yeah, but look at what these censors are threatening us with if we don't give them that promise. And I quote, a failure to meet the above obligations could compromise the good standing of Sun in the CBSC. In the event of membership termination, please know that all open complaint files will be transferred to the CRTC for their action. In addition, all future complaints made against Sun News will be dealt with by the CRTC. That's the government agency. Translation, if you don't shut Ezra up now and permanently in the future and do so in advance and stop him from saying anything that might bug us, we'll throw you to the wolves. What Troy Reeb hinted was the real danger here. Now, Andre Noel was crystal clear about what bugged her. In her letter, she told my bosses that I criticized her and the other broadcast censors by name. Now, she's not acting on any public complaint this time. She isn't having another investigation or secret meeting like before. She's just issuing an order to us on behalf of herself and her friends because she doesn't like the fact that I'm criticizing them. Do you see how the power of censorship can go to a censor's head? Do you see how the subjective judgment of what is unreasonable or offensive or bad can be abused with a bureaucrat drunk with power? Now, let me be clear. This isn't about David Klimenhaga or the 6,676 people who complained against Krista Erickson. They're just political activists gaming the system. This isn't about Troy Reeb or even Andre Noel or the actual people on the censors board. Really, it's not. And it's not even about Andre Noel's stunning demand to the Sun that I be censored in advance before I even say anything without a hearing of any sort. It's about what is causing all of this bad behavior, this un-Canadian behavior. And I say again, it is Section 5 of the broadcasting regulations that have the force of law. It's Section 5 of the broadcasting regulations that have forced the Sun to join the so-called voluntary censors board. It's Section 5 of the broadcasting regulations that make Troy Reeb say, Ezra, believe me, you're better being censored by me than by the government directly. It's Section 5 of the broadcasting regulations that give Andre Noel her power to make threats to my bosses that they better gag me or the Sun will be thrown to the wolves. It's Section 5 of the broadcasting regulations that are an archaic, obsolete, un-Canadian, charter-violating limit on my freedom of speech. The Sun's freedom to do business and your right to choose what you get to hear, no matter what Andre Noel says. That's the problem. And that's what we have to fix. Look, the CRTC, the government regulator, hardly enforces Section 5 rigorously itself. There's all kind of offensive stuff on TV. People just have the power to change the channel. I doubt the CRTC wants to get into the censorship game. Do they really want to get in the business of scrutinizing hundreds of TV channels and shows to see what might or might not be offensive to someone? I hope not. I hope that the CRTC just treats this as another antiquated law that's on the books, like old vagrancy laws that require people to have a certain amount of money in their pocket at all times, or laws against homosexuals that the police stopped enforcing long before the laws were formally repealed. I hope the CRTC makes the right call on this. But trust me on this one, you can't order the Sun to put me on a short leash to saying nothing controversial and expect that I'm going to do shows about cooking or the weather or sports. My business is a political commentator taking on controversial issues. Now, she has ordered that to stop. She's ordered me to stop. Sorry, it's not going to stop. So we might get kicked out of the Broadcast Censors Court, which means our government TV license will be in jeopardy. Read paragraph 6 of it. But Andre Noel's not the root of the problem. She's just the inevitable result of Section 5 of the broadcasting regulations. These regulations are outdated and unnecessary. They're a product of a different era, an era that is thankfully over. Freedom is on an upswing in Canada. One man has the ability to change all this. Stephen Harper. So let's talk to him. Let's tell him to do for TV freedom what his government just did for freedom in the face of human rights censors. Let's scrap Section 5 of the broadcast regulations. Not for me, for everyone's sake, even for Troy Reeb's sake and our competitors' sake, for the sake of all broadcasters, but really, who cares about them? This is about you. This is about all 34 million Canadians having the right to hear and see what you want to. This isn't just symbolic. It's about taking away the hammer from busybody bureaucrats. It's about taking away the potential for abuse, like this letter we just got slapped with. It's about ending the threats and coercion. It's about doing what's right. Now, I bet you $1 that Stephen Harper didn't even really know these old dusty regulations even still existed. Well, now he does. I want you to email Stephen Harper right now. Tell him I sent you. He's at pm@pm.gc.ca. That's his email. Tell him to repeal Section 5 of the broadcasting regs, just like he repealed Section 13 of the Canadian Human Rights Act, which basically said the same thing. Tell him this whole weird, un-Canadian system of censorship is so outdated. And worse, it's so un-Canadian. Tell them that your vote depends on it. Look, I have no idea how long the Sun will be able to back me up on this. So far, they've been great. Tougher than any other radio or TV station in Canadian history, really. No other TV or radio station has been so clearly threatened by the censors. I mean, you read it right there. If the Sun doesn't gag me in advance, they could lose their right to broadcast TV. You saw it. I hope they stand firm. But would the Sun really risk losing the millions of dollars they've invested in this station so far on a point of principle? Now, so far they are. If my bosses at the Sun are willing to bet the whole station on freedom of speech, if they're willing to bet all that money on the freest TV show in Canada, surely the least you can do is write to PM at pm@pm.gc.ca to ask him to change the regs to protect freedom of speech. It won't cost you a cent. It'll just cost you 30 seconds of your time. My friends, this is the moment. This is the moment where you decide whether or not freedom of speech counts in Canada. I'm not sure if in our lifetime we'll ever have such a great moment to strike a blow for freedom again, a combination of a conservative government that shows that it's been open to free speech and a freedom-loving broadcaster willing to force the issue and take a risk on me. That's what this comes down to. It's your choice. Do you choose the last 30 years of dreary liberal TV journalism with only one acceptable point of view allowed? Or do you embrace choice and freedom and fight for it by giving 30 seconds to writing a letter to the Prime Minister? I hope for my sake that you choose freedom, but I hope you do it for Canada's sake, too.